I am Wilhelm Helsingius, and I have psychology and cognitive psychotherapy degrees. Welcome to the episode 6 of the Love Unconditionally Handbook. Now, let's continue with an exercise you can practice to weaken your ego. If someone blames you, criticizes you, or does or says something that feels threatening, and you notice yourself getting upset, feeling the need to retaliate, stand your ground, or defend yourself, don't. Instead, do nothing. Try to endure the feelings and experiences your thoughts and ego create within you. Your ego tells you that you are under threat and must defend yourself. But if you listen to that voice, you diminish yourself by defending a constructed image of who you think you are, rather than who you truly are. If you feel a strong need to defend yourself, try to accept that your self-image, the one you believe to be you, is weakening. Observe what happens inside you as you allow this self-perception to fade. You may feel discomfort, but over time, you will grow stronger. Ask yourself, what do my thoughts tell me will happen if I don't defend myself? What do I experience? And where do I find myself internally when I refrain from defending myself, even though my ego might believe I will cease to exist if I don't fight back? By being less in the eyes of the ego, you actually become more. I'm not saying this is easy, but I promise you will discover something valuable within yourself if you dare to resist the urge to defend, explain, or justify yourself when your ego feels threatened. You can even be grateful when someone says or does something that makes you feel threatened or defensive, because it signals that you are close to something deeply important, something that, if faced, could lead you to stop hurting yourself. Your ego might insist that the person you are dealing with is the problem, but in reality, it is you who creates the discomfort or sense of threat within yourself. It is you who punishes or abandons your loving, peaceful nature, not someone else. You can also practice listening and being present for the other person. Instead of standing your ground, arguing, defending yourself, or asserting your own opinions and thoughts, try to understand what the other person is feeling and needing on a deeper level. This practice will help you grow psychologically, develop as a person, and weaken your ego. If you cannot tolerate yourself, your feelings, your thoughts, and what your ego or your self-image creates within you when someone does or says something you dislike, then you cannot be truly present and safe for anyone, not even yourself. This means you must be willing to sit with psychological discomfort within yourself in order to be something real and stable for both yourself and others. If you want, for example, a loving and fulfilling relationship, you must practice enduring yourself when your partner says or does something that makes you feel uncomfortable. Otherwise, you will only react, satisfying the needs of the self-image you have constructed or your ego, rather than being something real for another person. You may believe that reacting and asserting yourself benefits you in moments of discomfort, but in reality, this is when you neglect and mistreat the most loving, vulnerable, and caring part of yourself, the part that is far more real than your ego or the image you have of yourself. By making peace with the present moment, by being fully here, accepting what is, and refusing to be controlled by fleeting interpretations, reactive thoughts, and surface emotions, you weaken your ego. This allows you to experience peace, be present, and become something more real for yourself and others. If you feel unwell, anxious, threatened, or overwhelmed, take a moment to observe what your thoughts are telling you about yourself, the person you're with, or your situation. What personal needs are your thoughts using to provoke you and your ego? In that moment, you likely feel vulnerable and powerless on a deeper level, even if you aren't fully aware of it. If you are truly present in this moment, you will realize that there is no real threat, no negativity, regardless of what your thoughts may say. This realization comes when you understand that something can only be negative, threatening, or bad if you define it as such. Your ego and your constructed self-image, your worries, only survive as long as you believe your thoughts, interpret your feelings negatively, or allow your mind to dwell in the past or future, constructing possible threats. Would you agree that you cannot have worries or feel threatened if you are fully present in this moment and refuse to label what you feel, experience, or what happens as good or bad? Only time will reveal whether something is truly beneficial or not. And as I've said, your thoughts only have the power or meaning that you give them. Remember, as you experienced in the last episode, your body doesn't distinguish between what is really happening and what's just a thought. Don't worry, I'm not putting you through such a drastic exercise again, like the one with your favorite food. A single negative thought about yourself, another person, your situation, or anything that makes you feel anxious or afraid triggers the same stress response in your body as if it were real. Every time you fail to take responsibility for the threats your thoughts construct, you harm yourself. Your ego will try to convince you that one negative thought doesn't impact your overall well-being, but that's not true. Your ego constantly moves between the past and the future, avoiding this moment. If you stop defining, interpreting, fantasizing, projecting into the future, or dwelling on the past, you dissolve your ego. This means your worries, created by your thoughts, disappear, and your need to react vanishes, because there is no longer a perceived threat. Being present does not mean you won't feel what you feel. But no feelings are a reason to suffer, because there are no good or bad feelings, even though your ego may try to categorize some as undesirable or negative. When you are truly present, you have a much better chance of feeling what you really feel on a deeper level, because your thoughts are no longer consuming all your attention. You are the one who decides whether this moment is your enemy or your friend, an opportunity or a threat. Can you pause for a moment and reflect on your relationship with this very moment? Is there a difference between your relationship with this moment and your relationship with yourself? Is it possible that by being fully present and open to the moment, you naturally become more accepting of yourself too? I hope it's all right that we pause here, just for a moment, to revisit something together. Even if these things may sound simple, they carry weight. Because if you truly take them in, they can shift the way you live your everyday life and potentially your whole destiny. If any of it feels complicated, it may be your ego playing its familiar game. But as always, the choice is yours. Will you let the version of yourself that your thoughts have built keep you small, contained within old limits? Or will you allow yourself to expand? Like I've said, and will likely say again, it's not our inadequacy we fear. It's what we might truly be. What if you're not who you've always believed yourself to be? What if the way you are, and the way you relate to yourself and others, is deeply shaped by a picture your thoughts happen to create, together with the way you've come to see yourself? We tend to live as if that image is the truth. As if the story our thoughts built about us is the ultimate reality. And so we live by it, not because it's true, but because it feels familiar. If you strive to be yourself, you might never let yourself change. Holding on can feel like strength. But is it really? And in doing so, you might miss what you truly are and what you could become. Change can feel threatening. Most of us have felt that. But what if change isn't the end of you, or your ego, but a beginning of something more real? What if you did try to open your mind, instead of controlling? To allow yourself to expand and grow. To see with clearer, more open and creative eyes. To give yourself something that already lives within you, instead of resisting it. Because things are changing, and they always will, whether you resist or not. Still, your thoughts may try to hold everything in place, to keep things just as they've always been, at least in your mind. But sometimes, it's the resistance itself that hurts the most. Could it be that the most honest thing you can do is to ask yourself, what am I holding on to? And what is it, really, that feels so threatening about allowing yourself to change, to grow? If you never experience who you truly are and what you can be, but instead remain identified with your ego or your constructed self-image, it's like being a lottery winner without knowing you've won the jackpot. People, in general, are afraid of change, afraid of transforming, even though the reality is that everything is constantly changing. The best thing that could happen to you might be the moment you dare to change, to think differently, and in doing so, begin to connect with something more true within yourself, beyond just your thoughts, your habitual ways of functioning, and the identity you have believed yourself to be. If you hold on to the thought that you should not change, that thought itself can cause distress, stress, and unnecessary suffering. This suffering arises because of your resistance to the natural changes occurring, completely independent of you and the person you think you are. I often meet people who say they refuse to adopt any kind of artificial role that doesn't align with who they believe themselves to be. Then there are those who say they won't change just because someone else wants them to. At the same time, I meet people who want to find a life partner, improve their relationships, or make new friends, yet they say, if I'm not good enough as I am, then so be it. To me, this suggests that they do not recognize the value in considering others and adapting to those they interact with. But how can someone have a good relationship, form new friendships, or create a meaningful connection with anyone if they are unwilling to take the other person into account? Philosopher Martin Buber highlights that we need relationships in order to become ourselves. He talks about the I and you relationship, where we influence each other and are not the same with everyone we interact with. Do you behave exactly the same way with your mother, grandfather, best friend, a difficult neighbor, your boss, your dentist, or your grandchild? The fact that you are not the same with everyone does not mean you lack an authentic core self that exists independently of time, place, or whom you are interacting with. This core within you is not threatened just because you adapt to different people. In fact, by adjusting to others, you actually gain a deeper connection with who you truly are. The less you adapt, meaning the more you cling to an image or framework of who you think you are, the less you get to know your real self. When you dare to let go of and question the frame you or your thoughts have placed you in, and when you allow yourself to adapt to others and consider those around you, you will begin to see that this adaptation has nothing to do with who you truly are. On the contrary, by adapting and considering others, your core self becomes more visible, even if your thoughts try to tell you otherwise. The act of adapting and being considerate allows you to experience who you truly are from different perspectives and in different situations. It works like a light that illuminates your inner core, helping you become aware of your true self. In doing so, you can distinguish between your authentic self and the version of yourself that is merely a construct of your thoughts. We need others to find our true selves. We live in a time where professionals in psychology and self-development often emphasize the risks of adapting too much, without equally acknowledging the importance of considering and adjusting to others. Similarly, they often talk about shame as something negative, without reminding us of the value of healthy shame. If someone adapts out of fear, that is a different matter. But recognizing our need for connection, using our intelligence and life experience to understand one another, and taking others into consideration is not the same as being controlled by fear, it is the opposite. It is clear that we need to adapt in order to get along and function together. As I have mentioned before, one of the most important purposes of our intelligence is to help us understand and connect with those we interact with. This ability to consider others does not limit us, on the contrary, it helps us grow, develop, and get in touch with who we truly are and need on a deeper level. People who say they do not want to change often express this even when they face challenges in their relationships, whether with a partner, colleagues, or their own children. But what is so threatening about personal growth? Why is it so frightening to see life and our relationships as something that is constantly evolving? If we view ourselves and our interactions as something fixed, then changes in our environment or in the needs of those around us can easily feel like a threat when things do not go as we wish. Could it be that what benefits us both physically and mentally, and even gives our lives a deeper sense of meaning, is our ability to adapt and consider others, just like a car adjusts to bumps in the road with the help of shock absorbers, rather than breaking down or encountering problems when the road is not perfectly smooth? Does the car feel threatened by adapting to the bumps in the road? Of course not. So, what about us? Imagine a situation where your child treats you poorly, and when you say that you will not accept such behavior, your child responds, "I could consider you, but then I wouldn't be myself, and I won't take on an artificial role just for you." Or what if your friend told you, "I had an argument with my partner, colleague, boss, or children. I know exactly what I do that causes our conflicts, creates insecurity, or contributes to the problems in our relationship, but if I didn't stand my ground, argue, explain myself, or raise my voice, I wouldn't be myself." Imagine if your neighbor came to you and said, "I need to shovel away the snow blocking my car so I can get to work, but I can't do it because the shovel I prefer to use is not suited for the job. If I have to use a different shovel, then I won't be myself anymore, and I refuse to take on an artificial role that is not truly me just to get to work or clear the snow." What would you think about your friend? What would you want to say to them? And most importantly, what do you say to yourself if you notice that you function or think in the same way? Resilience is our ability to navigate change, and the lack of resilience is a direct cause of both psychological and physical distress, because no one lives in an environment that remains unchanged. It is difficult to develop resilience if we are rigid, if we cling to the framework our thoughts have constructed for us, or if we are incapable or afraid of exploring different ways of being depending on whom we are interacting with. Are we like rigid steel puzzle pieces that either fit or don't fit when it comes to our relationships with others? Or can we have a stable, unshakable core with a flexible outer layer that adjusts to the world around us? This flexible outer layer would allow for adaptation, becoming even more flexible as we become more aware of the core within us, the part of us that is unchanging and represents who we truly are. The version of yourself that you believe is threatened when you adapt and take others into consideration is merely a definition created by you or your thoughts. This definition is a result of limiting your flexible nature to something rigid, stripping it of the original adaptability it once had. If this once flexible part of you has hardened, and someone does something, or you even imagine doing something, that does not fit within the framework you have set for yourself, you will experience it as a threat. It is as if we have convinced ourselves that this rigid, inflexible version of ourselves, this mental construct that has reduced us to something smaller than we actually are, is our true self. We live in a time where we believe we can be conditional, meaning that we choose when to act in alignment with our core and when we do not. But our core is not something we can negotiate. We will always experience consequences when we neglect or ignore our loving essence. What do you think about the idea that there is no person you cannot be loving toward, no matter what your thoughts may say? I genuinely want to know what you think about this. What would it mean for you and your life if, from this moment forward, you were to be loving toward every person you meet, regardless of who they are, what they have done, or what they have not done? The same applies to your life partner, your child, your neighbor, or your boss. What if you were loving toward them, regardless of their actions? What does your ego and your thoughts say about this? What does the wisdom that tells us not to judge anyone until we have walked in their shoes mean to you? Could this be related to what it truly means to identify with someone or to really see the person you are interacting with, instead of assuming you already know them? If you want to try this, start by identifying with someone, genuinely trying to understand them, and then observe whether this changes your attitude toward them. Then, take someone you find it difficult to identify with and reflect on why you cannot or do not want to identify with them. Where does it take you within yourself when you even consider trying to identify with someone you do not want to? This exercise can be very powerful if you choose to try to understand or identify with someone you truly do not want to understand, or even someone you hate or fear. We exist in relation to others, and when we become aware that we are all connected, there is no longer a me or you as something separate from each other. What remains is what Eastern wisdom has recognized for 3,000 to 5,000 years as our true essence: love. Love is not just a feeling. It's a choice, something you are. A quiet act of willingness. Not always easy. Because it asks more of us than simply following our passing thoughts, our shifting moods, our ego's impulses. Love asks us to lean in, to show up, to build connection, to show compassion and understanding, rather than wait for it to arrive. It begins to reveal itself when we live from who we truly are, not who we think we should be. When love takes shape in what we do and how we think, we may come to sense something deeper than almost anything else we'll ever feel. If you imagine it as a dance, you are not the dancer, not the ego or who you did think you are, in control. You are the dance itself. Alive. One, instead of something separate. In quiet rhythm with something larger than your ego. Something you are a part of, but something that at the same time shapes you and lets you become who you actually are. We need something or someone to reflect ourselves in, just as a mirror always reflects something. If we focus only on ourselves, it is as if the mirror is trying to reflect itself. What truly matters is that we dare to step outside of ourselves and take an interest in something beyond our own being. Do you allow the love within you to radiate outward, like the sun's rays shining freely? Or do you believe that you should turn those rays inward, trying to make them shine back onto yourself, as if the sun were attempting to bend its rays to illuminate itself? Philosopher Alan Watts reminds us that we all have love within us, and that there is no fixed formula for how to love or embody love. He suggests that we have a greater capacity and ability to live in love, once we realize that trying to love ourselves first is futile, impossible, and frustrating. You can only come to this realization by understanding that there is no separate self that you can love. If you felt a sense of relief, it may be because you have intuitively sensed that there is something conflicting about the common messages we hear, messages that place so much emphasis on the self and the identity we believe we are. If you felt resistance or disagreement, try to continue with an open mind, trusting that there may be something in these words that could reveal itself as meaningful or relevant to you at a later stage. By freeing yourself from the idea that you must love yourself, you allow your light, your essence, to shine outward unconditionally. In doing so, you will experience the profound truth that we are all connected, and through this experience of connection, you will become aware of the love within you and come to feel it toward yourself as well. If you do not begin with unconditional love directed outward, it is easy to mistake self-centered concern for yourself as genuine self-love, when in reality, it is not. It's time for practice. 1. A moment of honest reflection. Purpose: to become aware of what you do out of old habits, the patterns you fall into in your relationships. Find a comfortable seat. Let your breath slow down and allow you to be more present. And ask yourself, how do I usually behave in connection with others? What roles or patterns do I tend to slip into? What is it, really, that makes it so frightening for me to step outside the rigid box I've put myself in and to try new ways of being? What is it actually that's so threatening in functioning and thinking in new ways? What do I believe might happen if I had the courage to step out of my box and comfort zone? Could I allow myself to relate and function in another way? What might be a different way to act, one that brings me closer to what I truly need on a deeper level? Write down what comes. Not to analyze. Just to see it more clearly. You don't need to fully understand it. You don't need to master it straight away. The act of pausing, seeing and realizing is already a step toward freedom. 2. Feel the difference in your body. Purpose: to explore how it feels to act from what's familiar, and how it feels to let go, even just a little. Think of a situation where you often feel small, helpless, threatened, stressed, or controlling in a relationship. Notice what happens in you when you imagine reacting the way you usually do. Stay with that for a moment. Then gently imagine doing the opposite, or at least a function in another way than before. Not stepping into your usual role. Not holding back or shrinking. Not limiting who you are. Not driven by fear. Not swept away by the first wave of feeling, or pouring everything out onto someone else. And not pulling away. Before you've paused, even just for a moment, to ask, what is it I truly feel? What is it I truly need? What is it I'm really reaching for? What do I have to offer in this very moment, something that has a value for both of us? What can I do to help the one I'm with get what they need? Because when I help them receive what they need, I also give something valuable to myself. Can I allow myself to act and relate in a completely new way, not just for someone else, but for my own sake? To give myself the chance to grow. To free myself from the rigid frame I've kept myself locked in, simply because I believed that's who I was. Maybe instead, you try a gentler way. One that invites connection. Something honest. Something mutual. Something that lets you both feel a little safer. A little more seen. A little more accepted. Can you see another way of being and function? If not, pause. Because we can't act on something we haven't yet been able to imagine. If you feel stuck, or do not know how you could behave in a more constructive way, ask someone you trust. Someone who cares about you. If you do see a new possibility, a new way to react or act, what happens in you when you imagine acting from there? It may feel unfamiliar, but maybe just a little more alive? 3. A question to carry through the day. Purpose: to open a softer inner space in this very moment. When you notice yourself slipping into an old role, pause and ask yourself, is this who I want to be, or is it just something I learned to be in order to survive? You don't need to answer. The question is enough. 4. A reminder for your inner child. Purpose: to begin healing the part of you that believes it must be a certain way to be loved. Each day, try saying something loving to the part of you that always tries to get it right. The part that holds it all together. That holds back. That clings. That walks through life as if stepping on thin ice. Or is afraid to love wholeheartedly. 5. Show a genuine interest in what your partner or friend needs. Try, as best you can, to meet that need unconditionally. No matter what your thoughts or ego might say. No matter how different you have to act or be. And as you do, Notice how your ego begins to shrink. How something in you softens, opens, and expands. Notice how relieving it can be to realize that meeting the other's needs, even if it means changing your usual way of being, does not threaten who you are. Not at all. Instead, you may come to see that you are so much more than you ever thought you were. To step outside your comfort zone, and to realize you are not who you believed yourself to be, that is real strength. It's a delicate kind of freedom. A quiet, but strong way to grow. To dare to love unconditionally, and to break free from the image your ego and your thoughts have built of you, may be one of the most courageous things a human being can do. And the more your thoughts resist, the more they whisper, "This isn't me. I cannot do it, or if I do it, I lose myself. I don't do things like this, it doesn't feel natural for me." The more meaningful it may be to try and do it anyway. I invite you to give yourself the gift of discovering who you could become. Not the one you've believed yourself to be, but the one waiting quietly beneath the surface. Please do dare to loosen your grip on the image you've carried. That old, familiar shape of self. Because you are so much more. And when it feels like everything is falling apart, when the old you, the one you've known, or the one you did think you are, begins to fade, and you fear there's nothing left, that is when your life actually begins. This was the second part of who you are and who you want to be. If you found what I shared to be interesting or relevant, feel free to press the like button. It helps others discover this handbook.